Today's section, verses 18 through 23, are rather heavy to unpack in one go, but it strikes me that there are a couple of sections in it, but one core idea that unites them. And it starts off with the heading for the chapter section of ignoring God leads to a downward spiral. And we've talked about in the earlier verses about what relationship looks like and about what trusting the Lord looks like, about Abraham and how he was declared righteous by faith, that he trusted. And so when it starts that, but God's angry displeasure erupts as acts of human mistrust and wrongdoing and lying accumulate as people try to put a shroud over truth. Because truth and fact are not necessarily the same thing. I've heard an expression that there are three sides to every story: your truth, the other person's truth, and the actual truth, and none of you are lying. And in that kind of idea, it allows for a bit more grace to hear each other, to allow for interpretation. Because the truth will always come out. It doesn't matter the length of time, because time is relative. It matters that the truth will always come out, and the truth will always set you free. It may irritate you or aggravate you, but it will free you. Now, as it continues, the basic reality of God is plain enough, because it is. Open your eyes, and there it is. By taking a long and thoughtful look at what God has created, mountains, galaxies, stars, the beauty in this world, just looking at a pair of humpback whales swimming through endless ocean. There's so much beauty, so much wonder, so much awe-inspiring. A-W-E, to be in awe, awesome things, that they just take you a moment to pull back and look at the wonder, to look at all of it, to see, as Paul goes, what they have always been able to see, what their eyes as such cannot see. Eternal power, for instance, and mystery of his divine being. It's right there. By taking a long and thoughtful look at what God has created, people have always been able to see what their eyes as such can't see. Because we cannot see his eternal power. We cannot see the mystery of his divine being. We cannot see the invisible God, but we can see his fingerprints everywhere, and we can see his son, Jesus, God made flesh. So nobody has a good excuse, to continue with Paul. What happened was this: people knew God perfectly well, but when they didn't treat him like God, refusing to worship him, they trivialized themselves into silliness and confusion, so that there was neither sense nor direction left in their lives. And I find myself wondering, especially for myself, when I put these up, I'm not wagging a finger. You call this a video log, just trying to share my walk. Because when I do put other things first, when I don't treat Yahweh God as king, I trivialize myself. And how often do we do it? Do we trivialize our own nature and lose all sense of direction in our lives, where it becomes silliness and confusion and nobody knows that any direction which way is up? Not ha-ha silliness, but just ridiculousness. Because we end up putting something else in that position. To continue with Paul, they pretend to know it all, but were illiterate regarding life. They traded the glory of God, who holds the whole world in his hands, for cheap figures you can buy at any roadside stand. It is dime store baubles, whether it be things like government, the internet, pornography, whether it be technology, whatever it is that we decide to put as the center of our life. Do we want to be the Joneses that everybody keeps up with, or do we want to be Christ's children who everybody comes over to hang with because we're sharing his light? When I was reading through this, there are two verses that came to mind heavily, and I'll type them out in the description. It's 1 Corinthians 14, 1 through 3, and 1 John 3, 14 through 17. And I'll even put links up in the description to the Bible Gateway passages so you can get it right there. Because they connect to each other. The idea that when we trivialize ourselves, when we start putting dime store baubles in place of our God, in place of recognizing that the one who created it all has us, when we trade the glory of God who holds the whole world in his hands for cheap dime store crap, we lose a part of who we are. Because when the cheap dime store bauble breaks or doesn't hold up, everything that we've been putting our rest on it crumbles. It goes back to, I think it's in Matthew 6, maybe Mark, but the foolish man who built his house on the sand. Those moments of sand, those moments of hevel, those things that are roadside baubles are the hevel. And when the world shakes it, they crumble. They are a house built upon the sand, which is why Jesus says, build your house upon the rock, him. Live in a relationship of trust. That's what we're called for in that relationship, to trust. In any relationship, you're called to trust. When you have a spouse or a partner or a mate, whatever terminology one would prefer, if you don't trust your mate, you can't actually have a relationship with them because there's always a guard between you. And just like with God, if we refuse to trust, if we have acts of human mistrust, then we spur ire as we would in any relationship. So perhaps today, as we move forward with grace new every morning, the focus for today can be trust. Because when we trade our God and our God's glory for something else, we lose what makes us us. Here is looking forward to tomorrow. The verses will be 24 through 25. See you then.